So I've been playing Assassin's Creed Valhalla recently.
Yeah.
And, I was a big fan of Odyssey. I think a lot of people said that it was bloated, and I agreed with that, but it was really fun exploring that world. And there was a lot of controversy, around Valhalla coming out because there was a designer behind it who said that, that called out Odyssey for being bloated and that because their world was smaller.
Someone at the studio was like, this game sucked.
Yeah, well, they didn't say the game sucked. They just said it was bloated. And what was nice about Valhalla was because it was a smaller game, they were able to finely craft all of the areas of it. So there wasn't
that's my association with Assassin's Creed is that they finely craft those games.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's why I was really excited actually about this one, because there is a lot of bloat, and credit where credit's due. Assassin's Creed is used in a lot of schools as a teaching tool for historical accuracy because they are so accurate.
Kenneth Branagh's Hamlet.
Much like Kenneth Branagh's Hamlet. But actually, I was playing Valhalla in preparation for covering Hamlet because of the Danes.
I'm more an antique Roman than a Dane.
I see. Well, I was running around this area, and it was just this giant snowfield where there was nothing. There was one wild dog that ran by, and then just nothing for miles, just nothing. I went into the bird's eye view to look down and see everything, and I realized I had been fooled again by Assassin's Creed. They said they had there was something exciting around every corner, and there wasn't. And
there were no corners there.
Well,
so that's your first problem.
Well, I turned off the game.
Okay.
And stop playing because a few times I've been around that track. So it's not just going to happen like that because I ain't no Valhalla Batgirl.
Yeah.
So many possible worlds, but we got this one. So many possible worlds, but we got this one.
Welcome to the Worst of All Possible Worlds, the first and only podcast to acknowledge the existence of Scandinavia. I'm the worst of all possible Brians.
And I'm the worst of all possible AJs. And if you don't hear a third voice on today's podcast, it's because Josh is out sick. He got the novel coronavirus.
Yeah,
and
SARS coronavirus 2. People are talking about it more and more because guess what, guys? We're in another wave.
That's very true,
so
but
watch out for that.
Yeah, but he is doing okay. He's doing
Josh
much better.
Fine.
He has Paxlovid. He's doing okay. He's got antivirals, and he's working his way through it. But he didn't feel up to recording today, so Brian and I decided to throw together this episode for you all, mostly because Josh said, and I quote, "I don't want to cover that fucking movie because we are here to talk about Kenneth Branagh's masterpiece."
We've talked about this for a while. We did an episode on Michael Almireda's Hamlet, which is a
2000,
a not good movie that had good ambitions.
Yeah, but Brian, this solves all your problems with Hamlet 2000.
Now we're going to talk about a terrible movie with no ambitions whatsoever.
No, but Brian, I went back and re-listened to the episode, and there was a lot of stuff about the religion aspect and how you can't really, that plot element of Hamlet doesn't really play in the modern day because it is such a secular version. And this one, there's crucifixes everywhere, man. There's a confessional booth.
No, there's not. There's 2 crucifixes.
Yeah, but he hit him.
There's crucifixes in a couple
No,
of
he
places.
hit them in the background, like the Mickey Mouse ears at Disneyland. They're everywhere. You just gotta look really hard.
Everybody is always like, there's a crucifix in every fucking movie is a crucifix because it's just 2 things meeting at a right angle.
Yeah.
Do you know what else does that? Buildings.
Math.
All the time. It's just how you make things.
Sorry, maths for our British listeners.
It's like that in triangles. You're just gonna see them all over the place. Yeah. Because
you see triangles, especially if you're horny.
Like the rhetorical U, as in most to all people.
The royal U.
See this? Like when they get horny, they just see triangles.
Yes. That's why the PlayStation is the horniest console.
AJ, I don't know how to tell you this, but every console's controller has a triangle on it.
I mean,
the A The letter A
No, but the line's moved up.
has a
Yeah,
triangle.
that's a little one. You're right that it does have that little one.
Yeah. They all have the triangle.
But the Sony PlayStation is the most explicit. Like it is the most, which has this Hamlet, I think, is the most horny Hamlet that we'll probably ever get.
I don't know if it's the most horny Hamlet because he's not. It's not a Hamlet where everyone's fucking their dad or whatever, because that's certainly going on. I mean,
That's true.
Ingmar Bergman did the whole thing with his Hamlet, which for some baffling reason he didn't film with Peter Stormare, where Gertrude and Claudius are just fucking on stage.
Oh.
Where all of their courtiers are just clapping in rhythmic unison, like an Eyes Wide Shut thing. But this was like
they do that at a
6
point in
years
this movie.
before Eyes Wide Shut. Yeah, well, yeah, there is something where Hamlet talks about what's basically a chivalry of the king and queen of Denmark. AJ, I don't know. You don't come from hill folk. I don't know if you know what a chivalry is.
I do like their milk. It's my 30 Rock joke for the day.
On the wedding night of the happy couple, you go and shoot guns and bang pots and pans outside of their cabin while they're doing it. And then later in the night, all the, I don't know, brothers and male family of both parties, maybe, go and grab the husband out of bed and throw him into a body of water somewhere. Like if there's a nearby pond.
Sure.
Watchers of the Beverly Hillbillies will remember when the chivalry was carried out and they threw him in the cement pond.
And he died?
No, it's just a pool.
Just a pool. I'm sorry. I thought it was a...
Have you never seen the Beverly Hillbillies?
I haven't. I thought it was just
it's
a
the
giant
Hamlet
thing
of the English language.
Oh, I see.
It's it's a crowning achievement in art.
Something.
I can't believe it. Until you get to the last
state of California.
Yeah. Oh God, you really need to watch at least like a little bit of Beverly Hillbillies.
Yeah, we can certainly cover it.
No, I don't mean cover it. I don't mean as a job. I mean for your own personal enrichment, for pleasure, for joy.
Well, but this podcast brings me nothing but pleasure. It's like just one great thing that we watch after another.
That's a significant difference between you and I.
What this podcast does for me is what triangles normally do for me. Sorry, go ahead. You're saying about your grandfather.
My grandpa, on his wedding night, he was going to get chivalried by his brothers. I believe my Uncle Hosey and my Uncle Silas and my Uncle Noah. And so they didn't have a pond nearby, so they filled up the trough.
Oh, okay.
It was a
is that big enough for
trough.
Okay. Yeah, big enough for a human.
Huge, like a big trough. I don't know. Yeah, like a cow trough or a horse trough or something. I don't know.
Like a water coffin.
Enough that you could, drop a
whole
6'1", a 6'1" man into it, I guess. My great grandfather Abner was not keen on this. So he drained it. So they got to the point where they grabbed him and dragged him out in the middle of the night, and they were about to throw him in before they realized it was empty, and thankfully did not throw him in.
What did it have?
Break
hurt?
his fucking neck.
Oh, sure.
So Hamlet, of course, has been filmed many times.
Yes.
The very first Hamlet on screen was likely Sarah Bernhardt in 1900. She was the leading Shakespearean actor of her moment, and this film was actually sound synchronized in 1900. Wow. So you could actually hear her speaking the speech, I pray you.
Wow, that seems really early. I thought most talkies happened in the 20s.
That's extremely early. Yeah, absolutely. No, 28 is when we started seeing like major distribution for talking pictures, starting with The Jazz Singer, which itself isn't really a talking picture. It's a synchronized sound picture that is mostly silent except for the songs that Al Jolson sings and a little bit of his ad-libs leading into the songs.
Sure.
We did have synchronized sound. People were playing with it from the very beginning. Like the moment we started getting pictures moving, someone was like, I bet if we work really hard, we could synchronize a record to this for a minute or two. And so they did.
Wow.
So, George Méliès played Hamlet in his own filmed version of Hamlet that was also a few minutes long. This old era of like 10 minutes at most. Full-length Hamlets, of course, followed in the talking pictures era in the 30s. Obviously, Olivier did his, and that's the one that people talk about the most. But of course, the one that everyone sees in school is Kenneth Branagh's. You read Hamlet, and then you're like, let's watch some scenes from it, from this incredibly sterile promontory.
Yeah, I was going to say that it is exactly that. It is a sterile promontory. It's fascinating because he doesn't cut a single word from Hamlet. That's like one of the big things. This movie is 4 hours long, 4 hours, 3 minutes long.
They take stuff from the folio and then add things back in from the second quarto to have the most complete
version.
dialogue you've ever seen on the silver
screen, baby. And it is remarkably dull. I think the first thing, like right out of the gate, this is one of the most boring films you'll ever watch. It's a lot of people sitting in a room while a camera circles them incredibly slowly and then cuts to like them talking and the other person talking.
You can tell he's trying to imitate Dr. Zhivago because he pulls it off perfectly. It is unwatchable.
Oh, absolutely. And I'd never even thought about that, but yeah, no, it really is striking how bad most of the actors in this movie are at delivering Shakespearean lines so that they are intelligible. Yeah. I'm not saying they don't have a faculty for the language or that they don't know even what they're saying necessarily, but they're so familiar with the text that they go too fast. They simply go too fast for you to track what's happening. No one is actually a bigger culprit of this than Branagh himself, which would have been caught had he had someone else direct it, but he couldn't.
No,
he just
Branagh's just not
go.
that guy.
He's
so
not.
he was 15 years old when he saw Derek Jacobi in Hamlet. Back in the age of Derek Jacobi. And then he ended up being sort of the protege of Jacobi and John Gielgud. Gielgud was the principal or chancellor or whatever the fuck they have at the RADA.
Yes.
Where Branagh was studying. And Branagh, of course, as a young man as a child, had emigrated from Northern Ireland to Great Britain and had changed his accent because of the horrific bigotry he faced at the hands of all these fucking English students.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, and a lot of that is, I think, chronicled in Belfast in the movie he just released, which is about his
which
time growing
I hear
up
is
in...
actually good, but people also say that this movie is good. So you're not going to get me again. I did like All Is True, but that says something more about me than anything else.
I also want to say that I think Branagh is a perfectly fine filmmaker. I think he gets obsessed with camera tricks sometimes. Like if you watch the original Thor, which he directed, and they brought him on board because they were like, we want to turn this Marvel property into a more Shakespearean bent. And they brought him on specifically because of his experience with Shakespeare and working with sort of more classical text.
And they weren't going to get Julie Taymor.
They sure weren't. But that movie is all about him being obsessed with Dutch angles. Like he had heard that you can turn the camera sideways to like instill a kind of like uneasy feeling in the audience. And then he just did that for most of the movie. Like,
yeah, it's like he just watched Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas for the first time. And he's like, oh, fuck.
Yeah. And
I remember someone, I forget who, described Fear and Loathing as having more Dutch tilts than a Vermeer exhibit in an earthquake.
In the lead up to like making this movie, to making Hamlet, he did a lot of interviews, with people about how he was going to tackle it and like what he was really focused on. And he said he really wanted to like capture the thriller elements of Hamlet to make it into a scary film.
Which is sort of what Olivier already did, right? He made it kind of gritty and narrow.
But thrillers, by necessity, have to be short in order to maintain the tension. Because Hamlet, as constructed in this movie, has so, like, for every, like, big thriller scene, there's, like, 3 scenes of just kind of hanging out and doing like really outdated bits that don't make any sense anymore. I mean, why would you include the Ronaldo scene and then have Polonius be as cunning as he is? Like that whole scene is about Polonius being just a fucking clueless moron. But anyway.
Yeah, very naive. But they wanted Polonius's naivety to be real. They wanted real intrigue built into that. Yeah. Because again, he just wants this to be Dr. Zhivago. Yeah. So Branagh then played Hamlet, I think with his own company. He's a go-getter. Yeah. He's the guy. He gets things done. He meets people and says, hey, I'm going to work with you, right? Yeah. When he was a teenager, or when he was studying at RADA, he wrote a letter to Derek Jacobi saying, I want you to see me play Hamlet. Yeah. Right. He performed a speech from Hamlet while at the school for the Queen of England herself. Oh, shit. He played Hamlet in his own company in the 80s, then went on to the RSC, directed by Adrian Noble, which I believe that had Jacobi as Claudius in it. He did a radio drama of Hamlet for BBC Radio with Jacobi, with Gielgud. Yeah. So he very quickly became the boy, the handsomest boy. And I think he's kind of resisted the arc that a lot of the people who came before him took. He didn't become the artistic director of an institutional theater. He did not become the principal or chancellor or whatever of one of the major schools. He's still out there being a Hollywood filmmaker doing Agatha Christie adaptations now.
With enough champagne, I've heard, to fill the Nile.
And
With enough champagne to fill the Nile.
What? Is that your Gerard Depardieu?
No, that's Gal Gadot.
No, I know. I've been waiting for her for a long time.
Good thing it wasn't his Gerard Depart 2. That one's just for one of our listeners, Andrew Acevedo. Branagh then makes Henry V into a movie. And people who like Henry V like that movie.
Yeah. Was it also uncut? Did he do the whole thing, the whole text?
I mean, it's not notable if you do the full text of anything uncut unless it's Hamlet.
Yeah.
So I don't really know. I know in that one he didn't have any facial hair, which is a huge mistake for that man because he does not have lips. And he knows he doesn't have lips. I've seen him comment on it on Graham Norton.
Oh, wow.
He knows he doesn't have lips. And the Hamlet facial hair is probably the best he's ever done for himself.
Yeah.
But Henry V, he's totally clean shaven because I guess he's described as clean shaven.
He's got kind of an Ian McGregor vibe when he has the full beard.
I just can't stand Henry V.
Oh, really?
Not just as a movie, but as a play.
Interesting.
I mean, first, so I hadn't read or seen the Henry IVs when I first got to Henry V in my curriculum.
Sure.
And Henry V spends a third of its time mourning the death of a character that I had never met before.
Oh, sure.
Who's in 3 other plays, but not that one.
Yeah.
You spend all this time in the play with these guys wandering around just being like, too bad Falstaff's dead. Like, okay. You have a whole scene in French. You're just stuck with Henry being like the good king or whatever. It's blindly patriotic. I don't know why this play appeals to anyone outside of England who doesn't look like a baked ham. And like the end with the French lady where he's like, we will make our own language. It's like, please, Jesus Christ, what the fuck is happening here?
Well, Adam Sandler would later
Pew.
adapt that into Spanglish, but it was Frenchlish.
And that movie is told entirely through lingering close-ups of Kenneth Branagh's lipless face.
Yes.
As he just trots his way through these fucking monologues with huge pauses so that we can see.
Yeah. Well, because
him
but that's the
jacking
thing.
off in his brain.
Okay, so Kenneth Branagh, I think, ultimately does not understand the plays he adapts on like a fundamental level.
No, I disagree because I think he is doing the institutional thing with every single one. I think he is not taking any risk except when he did Love's Labour's Lost when he made it into a musical, which is not a very bold risk.
No,
and he cut every speech that didn't belong to his character.
Sure, absolutely, but. So in the like lead up to the release of Hamlet, he would be doing interviews and things, and he would talk about how he wanted to make his Hamlet less melancholic. That when he read the play, he considered Hamlet he would see like a man of action, a man of great popularity, a man who was like a man about town, like raconteur. And that's the Hamlet that he wanted to put on film. But the problem is when you take depression out of Hamlet, half the soliloquies don't make any fucking sense.
No, it's so weird. He's just like, it feels like they're just in the text because they have to be.
Yeah, because he has
shows
to do
up and
every
it's just
single
like
thing.
talking about death and everything. And it's like, well, this is a movie about intrigue, which a smarter director would have made cuts.
Yeah.
But that's not what Branagh wanted to do here.
If you wanted to do something strictly about intrigue, you cut all the soliloquies.
Branagh wanted to, take Hamlet, which is the crowning achievement of the English language, right? Like if you talk about the English language as a large abstract concept and its history, you get 2 things out of it. You get Beowulf and you get Hamlet.
Yeah.
Beowulf, while not exactly a cursed product like Cleopatra or Don Quixote in movies.
Yeah.
Movies have their own curses that are separate from plays. Macbeth has never been a cursed movie, but Don Quixote has always been a cursed property, as has the story of Cleopatra.
Well, I mean, it did fine for a musical.
Well, yeah, but then they made that musical into a movie.
And it was not good. No, it's
Man of La Mancha movie is down there with the Mame movie.
Yeah, it's quite bad.
Beowulf was not a cursed property, but it was a joke. It was one of those things where it's like when a movie's budget is getting too bloated, it's like, oh, they're adapting Beowulf. That's what it became. There was like never any true, honest attempt to make a Beowulf movie until Neil Gaiman and Roger Avery made a kind of fitfully okay film.
Robert Zemeckis came in and turned it into like a PS2 cutscene.
This movie, Hamlet, as the crowning achievement of the English language, of course, right at that point, you're making a mistake. You're looking at it in the abstract. You are not looking at Hamlet for what it is,
yes,
what the story is, what the focus is,
yes,
or focuses are, whatever.
Yeah.
You are talking about it as simply an artifact. And that's what this movie is doing. It puts in every line of text that could possibly fit.
Yes.
And it is shot on fucking 70 millimeter film.
Yeah.
It was the first movie in the UK shot on 70 millimeter since Ryan's Daughter, which was a David Lean movie in 1970.
Brian, can you explain to me why in the credits it says it was shot in 65 millimeter?
Yeah. So I would love to.
Yeah, I was going to say, this is a camera question, so I was like, might as well.
So 70 millimeter film is the size of the format when it is at the theater.
Okay.
The actual picture is 65 millimeters across.
Oh, okay.
Well, not the whole picture, but the film with the picture and the perforations on the side.
Yeah.
A similar size to what you see in a medium format still camera, like a Brownie or a Hasselblad. Then the big thing with 70 millimeter that made it so special was that it also had surround sound.
Ooh.
6 channels of sound. So if you went and saw The Sound of Music in 1970 at the big roadshow production, you would get the sound all around you, different tracks in the back and everything, like you see today with everything that gets put in theaters.
Nice.
That soundtrack is 5 millimeters wide. So that's what makes it 70 overall. The cameras themselves are shooting with a 65 millimeter film, and then it becomes a 70 millimeter film when you graft the sound onto it for the theaters.
Well, I will say that the movie does look pretty great. Like in terms of like the actual quality of film.
I don't know, comparing it even to The Sound of Music, which is an absolutely gorgeous movie, it doesn't come anywhere close.
Yeah.
It doesn't come anywhere close. Even if Sound of Music was just the interiors with Christopher Plummer, it still is miles ahead of this movie. So this was the last movie to be shot on 70 millimeter in its entirety until The Hateful Eight.
Oh, wow.
There are a couple other movies that did 70 mil in the meantime, like The Master, which was not the whole movie. It was most of the movie.
Sure.
And Samsara, which is not a narrative picture. It's a documentary.
Sure.
And of course you had Christopher Nolan shooting some sequences for some of his movies on IMAX, which is also a 65 millimeter format, but it goes horizontally.
Oh, interesting.
And therefore allows you to actually have an even larger image. So this classic old 70 millimeter format from sort of the Todd Ayo era, Cinerama Dome era, this for a very long time was the end point of all of it.
Yeah.
Ron Howard almost had it with Far and Away, which is also not a very good movie. And then Branagh was like, no, I must do it. I have to curl my lips into my mouth.
Yeah.
I must shoot this film on 70 millimeter. I must make it the longest film of all time. I must make it.
Brian's lips have vanished from his face.
Not hard to do with my mustache being as big as it is.
That's
but
true. But no, it was, and when you watch the behind the scenes for this movie, Branagh really wanted to do like long takes. And there are a lot of like long takes in this movie.
And that's what, to be honest, that's what you should do when you have 70 millimeter.
Yeah.
That you should let it breathe like that because you're going to be putting it on a fucking massive screen. You don't want to be making that. It's the same thing with 3D. You don't want it to cut as fast.
Right.
And you want to be able to show off, but he doesn't have the sense of what, and his DP doesn't have the sense of what it means to really show off with the capabilities of this format.
Right. And, there's a lot of like, I saw them rehearsing the Ophelia Get Thee to a Nunnery scene where he's just running up and he's opening all the mirror doors that he can't open up too far because you see the camera.
He can't open them too far because the mirror, it's just... Oh.
Yeah, no, and the DP, like looking like he hasn't slept in like 9 days, is just staring into the camera being interviewed for this. He's like, the best and worst part of this entire film are the mirrors, because you have that great scene in To Be or Not to Be, but then you can see me in most every other shot, so we have to figure out how to not do that. Long drag of a cigarette, his hand shaking.
I mean, you have to think like this was what was going on last year at Marienbad too. Just like these French DPs just being like, oh my fucking God, put it right there.
Yep.
They'll say it. They don't even care anymore about people. They're just like, just put it there.
Yeah.
I need to get this camera to go through this room made entirely out of mirrors and spin it around.
So Branagh is approaching this film as both being like, he really wants to recreate like the epics of, his childhood, to make it like...
He had his success with Henry V. He made Much Ado About Nothing, which actually is good, minus Keanu Reeves.
Yeah.
Basically. That's a wonderful movie.
I think I like Keanu's performance in that. I think more than you do, but I will agree that he does seem miscast.
Yeah.
But Branagh's films work at their best, I think, when he just allows his actors to like have fun and go loose, and that just can't happen when his Hamlet is on screen in this movie, which is most of the runtime.
And it seems like some of the actors in this movie notwithstanding, it works best when he gets good Americans, like Denzel in Much Ado About Nothing.
Yeah.
And Denzel's the best part of that movie.
By far and away.
Then Branagh did a movie called A Midwinter's Tale, which was self-funded. That was about people trying to put on a production of Hamlet. It's sort of a precursor to the Canadian TV show Slings and Arrows.
Oh, interesting.
That people rather liked. And then he was able to get to Castle Rock Entertainment, which was the Warner Brothers sort of subsidiary that Rob Reiner had co-founded.
Right.
And convinced them to produce this movie, even though it was only 5 years since another Hamlet had been done with Mel Gibson.
Branagh actually praises Gibson's performance in all of his interviews. Like he's very sort of magnanimous in his praise for every Hamlet that's come before him. He actually seems to be like a Hamlet nerd. Like this guy has studied every Hamlet that's ever been.
Like Hamlet is that Branagh is the guy. Like I said, he is a people pleaser.
Right.
He is a guy who gets things done. And watching him on set, he is always making jokes.
Yeah.
He's always just getting people to laugh and take it easy. That is how he runs a set because he's a people pleaser. So he's one of those guys that people will work with over and over and over again. As you see in all of his Shakespeare movies, going into his Agatha Christie movies, he even gets his acting double in Hamlet to play larger roles in later movies.
Oh, wow.
He knows how to owe someone a favor and then pay that favor off.
Yeah, and Kate Winslet, in her interview for like the behind the scenes documentary, had never really done Shakespeare before, and she was terrified at the prospect of having to play Ophelia.
And he called her.
Yeah, he called her up.
This was one of the first times she had been offered a role.
Yeah.
Because she was still on the way up.
Well, she was 19 years old. Like she was a baby.
It was during Hamlet that she actually went to the U.S. to audition for Titanic.
Oh, wow.
And came back.
On the phone with Branagh, she was like, it's Shakespeare. And he's like, so what? You can do it. It's not hard. And I think that the Hamlet that we see in this movie, this sort of very popular, very kind, very loving to like the players especially, I think that's the clearest insight we get into Branagh as a director and how he runs a set, which is praiseworthy, I think.
Yeah, no, that's totally worthwhile. And you from intuition, you'd think that would result in a movie that's far less dull and academic than what we end up getting.
Yeah.
But he just had too many ideas about like Hamlet in the abstract, about what it means to make a movie like this in the abstract.
Yeah.
That just make this the dullest thing it could possibly be. So we begin this movie. It's an English castle. It's the place where Winston Churchill was born, apparently.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
The ground is lined with detergent because it doesn't snow in England. We see a statue, presumably of Hamlet Sr.
Yeah, Papa Hamlet.
We see Francisco looking at the statue, and it keeps like getting like closer and closer, and we see the hand of Hamlet, the statue, on the hilt of the sword, and then it moves. We have a jump scare. Ooh. And then for some reason, Bernardo tackles Francisco out of nowhere, and that's where you get who's there.
Stand and unfold yourself!
The movement of this little green statue is just like, I was on the podcast along with Josh. Have you seen this? And we talked about this Roddy McDowall horror movie from 1967 called It, which is about a golem. And the movement of that statue reminded me a lot of that golem.
Yeah, and it should be said that the statue of Hamlet that they used is vaguely similar to like the statues that they would have at the actual Elsinore.
I mean, the Kronborg itself does not serve as that much of an inspiration. I think even the checkerboard floor, which Kronborg has, is a coincidence. Maybe the production designer was making some conscious choices, but it certainly doesn't seem to be one of Branagh's conscious choices.
Kronborg, during Shakespeare's time, would not have looked like this at all. Obviously, this is set in the 19th century, but there are a lot of like superficially similar elements of what the redesign of Kronborg was after Kronborg burned down.
Oh, I see. There's a ghost.
There's a ghost, and this is where
I hate the ghost.
The ghost sucks. The ghost is very, very bad.
I hate the ghost so much. And I found out from listening to the commentary what happened here. Because
I would love to know.
The biggest problem with the ghost, right, is that no one has a relationship with it.
Yeah.
Like, you don't know where it is. You just see guys running, and then you see a completely abstract shot of
a suit of armor.
I guess it's supposed to be the statue. I didn't even realize that it was still connecting to the statue because it doesn't connect.
Well, it jumps the 182, which is disorienting. Yeah.
Right. There's no physical relationship. There is no spatial understanding of where it is. There are these weird shots from above in the courtyard.
As if it were a drone shot or like a crane shot, yeah.
Yeah, but it's like they even describe it as a POV shot, but they're not looking at it. So it's not a POV shot. They're like looking below it.
Yeah.
So it's like above the ghost somehow, and then we have a shot of the ghost. The ghost was not planned to be in this or I think the next scene. I don't think Branagh wanted anyone to see the ghost until the actual conversation with him. He just shot these guys running around the courtyard.
With this crane shot like over.
With the idea that the ghost would simply be implied until later. So then he had to reshoot and then just, I don't know, had Brian Blessed stand in a T pose in a bunch of fucking dry ice.
Complete shadow.
Just so they could get one shot of his face before he drifts off. I mean, it showed like, so there's already this very confused relationship that he wants to have. And I think I think we talked about this with the Almereyda Hamlet. Is there are a lot of directors who get too deep in this, is the ghost real or not?
Yeah.
And I don't think the play is asking that question at all.
No, never.
It asks whether the ghost is really Hamlet's father or maybe a demon.
Yes.
But it's never like, is the ghost in someone else's head? Because it's like five guys see it.
Yeah,
you know?
they do.
And they put so many fries in the bottom of the bag.
Right. Too many, one might say. You're not going to eat all those fries.
Never get the bigger size. You're going to get the same amount of French fries either way.
Absolutely will.
That's
and they throw some peanuts in there too.
That's
for your elephant fries.
That's more like Danish fries.
Yeah, more like mayo.
That would be really
bad.
Just that would be terrible.
Cover it in mayo.
But like imagine like they're Danishes, but they're fries.
Ooh,
no, not for me.
It's doing it for me.
Okay, well,
yeah. Just melt them down in the middle like a cheese.
Now we
Danish.
know which one of us is a little pervert.
Yeah.
It's both of us.
I'm jerking it to triangles, Brian. Of course I'm the pervert.
So I hate this ghost, but it sets up a problem that a lot of characters end up not having understandable spatial relationships with each other that we'll see later. Yeah. Even though this one can be taken up with a post facto decision that was made at the very late stages of production.
Yeah.
You can't say that the same about other situations.
It's proof in the text that Hamlet is going mad because later on when he's with Gertrude and he sees the ghost again, Gertrude can't see the ghost, whereas all these guards and Horatio can see the ghost at the beginning. So that one is in Hamlet's head.
I don't think it's in Hamlet's head. I think he just chooses not to appear to Gertrude.
Interesting.
I think that the reality of ghosts in Hamlet is concrete, but ghosts themselves follow mysterious rules because they're ghosts.
Yeah, sure.
That's my opinion. I don't think Hamlet ever gets nutty. He gets kind of nutty with it.
So anyway, Jack Lemmon appears.
Yeah. So there's Jack Lemmon. We got our first like big celebrity cameo.
Hey,
Jack Lemmon.
He does
I'm
fine.
Jack Lemmon.
He does fine.
He's like, I walked 3 times upon this, whatever. Then we get to discussions of Fortinbras, and we get a cutaway to Fortinbras. And
there is one thing in this opening scene that I think is very demonstrative of a lot of stuff that Branagh's going to do throughout the film in order to activate the text visually.
And to throw in some more celebrities.
Yeah. Branagh will every once in a while, a character will be talking about cannons, and then the camera will cut to shots of people making cannons.
Yeah,
or like you'll be talking about,
which is funny because when the cannon gets fired, we don't get a shot of the cannon being fired, even though that would have made sense.
Yeah,
so we see Fortinbras being mentioned, and I do understand showing him. I think it's done poorly because he's just in a black void.
Yeah.
It's like a very old like TV set where they have no money and they're like, we're just filming this live. We're going to do a different show tomorrow.
In a war room with a giant map that just says Norway on it.
I get showing him because they have preserved so much of this text. They talk about Fortinbras and they talk about Norway and this history a lot. You probably do need to set up that he is a real concrete person that exists.
Right, and he's played by Rufus Sewell, who is like a notorious villain character of the 90s. He was the bad guy in Knight's Tale, for example. And watching this movie, I was just like, God, I hope he got to play Macbeth at some point because he would fucking rule as Macbeth. It turns out, 1999, he got Macbeth because of this movie. And it sucks
on
that
stage, or did he do a movie of it?
It was on stage.
Okay.
But he wears almost the same crown that he wears in this movie. Which is
Shakespeare directors. Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Speaking of crowns, this scene ends with all the guys sort of huddling in the back of the courtyard.
They're so cold. Or pretending to be so cold.
As they walk off, there is this emblem of a crown, on the wall.
Yes.
That then crossfades in a sort of graphic match into the throne room.
Mm-hmm.
And we see this sort of wedded procession. It's like, I guess, just after the wedding.
Yes.
Kenneth Branagh is very proud of featuring the bourgeoisie in this scene. It's not just the people of the castle.
Right.
It's ordinary people.
It's the Danish people.
And so he's playing up the fact that his Claudius is trying to create like a more open Denmark. He's trying to show off that like, we are accessible, we are modern, we are enlightened.
We're going to listen to you, the people. We've invited you
Yeah.
into our sacred space to help us celebrate our marriage.
And we get a brief cutaway again to Norway and another black void featuring Sir
Norway
John
is
Mills.
Notoriously a black void. That's where the Boig lives.
We're in the Boig. Yeah, we're in the Boig right now. So we see Sir John Mills as the King of Norway. John Mills, you may know from the Swiss Family Robinson, or he played Gus in Cats. So there's another kind of famous guy.
Yeah.
There we go. The guy from the Swiss Family Robinson, the Disney movie. They made that walk-through attraction that then
Robinson.
became the...
Norway loves you more than you will know.
I don't think Norway loves them at all.
Oh.
They have antipathy for the Swiss.
So this scene is actually very, I think, colorful and alive. Claudius is wearing
I wouldn't say
bright
very.
red.
It's trying to be.
Yeah, it's like
it's trying
red
to be
and white.
colorful and alive.
It looks like a candy striper convention for the most part, but it also sets like the tone of this thing being very explicitly 19th century restoration. Chessboard floor. This was a set that they built so they could later like absolutely annihilate it when Fortinbras like invades.
Yeah.
And I honestly,
it's full of mirrors.
It's full of mirrors.
You don't quite see the mirrors here because everyone's seated in front of them, but this has the shot that everyone knows because it's on the box. It's where all the petals are being thrown from the roof. It's the scene that's supposed to look amazing in 70 millimeter, and it still just doesn't quite get there.
No, I mean, the flower petals are like, I think, one of the bigger swings he takes as a director.
Yeah,
and I mean, that's not really saying a whole lot because it's not really that big a swing.
He just needs to get in there. He needs to get in the flower petals, in my opinion.
And have him fall down, like, or really like make the pink pop. Like they're just, they kind of fade because everything is white. Like the entire room is just white. So they kind of fade.
They're very
into the
pale petals too. They're pinkish, but they're more white than anything. Hamlet's skulking in a corner. He's wearing black.
Everyone's applauding. They're like, yeah, Laertes, you get to go to France. And then the camera swoops behind the huge crowd of people, and standing by himself in a long hallway clad in all black is Kenneth Branagh's Hamlet, whose hair could, I guess, conservatively be described as when I tried to look cool in 7th grade and got frosted tips.
I think it's sort of okay, but that's me. I don't know. It's not my complaint with him, that's for sure.
It's not my main complaint, but it is a complaint. It's just he has to be like.
I actually thought he looked more or less fine, maybe a little too old. But
he does talk a lot in his interviews about how he wanted to make sure that he was old enough in order to be able to play the part intellectually as opposed to just being physically 30.
Yeah, whatever. Fucking whatever.
Yeah. No, it's very dumb because it speaks to putting Hamlet on a pedestal, which is what this entire film does.
These interiors are not shot in Blenheim Castle. This is shot on a soundstage. Very large soundstage. Everyone leaves. We get the petals. Hamlet has his too solid flesh monologue, which is, sort of the exposition of what's happened. His dad died less than 2 months ago, and they got and his uncle then just married his mom. And,
where he explicitly mentions his melancholy.
And this is a bad scene. This is a bad monologue. I mean, it's a good monologue.
Yes.
But it's being done poorly. It's recitation. He's reciting it. And that's what you're going to get for most of this movie.
It is a performance that I like to refer to as, look, I know the lines. And that makes sense if you don't have a director.
Yeah.
Like you can see his mind thinking about camera shots as he does this monologue. You can see him being like, okay, so I have to walk this amount of paces to stop so the camera can get me and not be caught in one of the 9 mirrors I put on the wall.
They do so many long tracking shots. They reinforced the floor and made it perfectly flat so that they didn't have to put tracks down.
Right.
And he didn't like steady cams either. So it's actually a dolly on tires rolling around the set at all times.
Yeah.
And you see a lot of the floor, so they couldn't even tape it. So you had to figure out your marks using number of steps, very technical details like that, because these are very, very long shots. Yeah. Which again, bold, very few of them are actually inspiring in any way.
I understand his interpretation of Hamlet when he's around other people. Like, I understand the guardedness and perhaps recitation being like a tactic to not have to fully engage with those around him.
Yeah.
But you can't get away with that shit in the soliloquies. We got to see the real person at the core of this. And there's nothing happening in this movie.
Horatio, the guards, they show up, they tell him about the ghost outside. And he's like, oh, my father's spirit. And he sends them off and he's like, I'll join you tonight. And he closes the door. He's like, my father's spirit in arms, as voiceover while he's alone.
Could have just talked.
Then he starts talking. Okay, so like,
cool. Great.
Part of it is talking, part of it is voiceover.
Which could be interesting if you're doing that for all of them, all the soliloquies, like he's actually having a conversation with his head, but he doesn't commit to it. He doesn't commit to the bit.
So then we get another really long tracking shot, which is mostly just people walking in a straight line outside. It's Laertes and Ophelia. It's a very long shot. We have the Laertes-Ophelia scene where they talk to each other. Polonius gives his advice. He's not seen as a doddering old fool in this part of the movie for some reason.
Basically ever, which is my biggest problem with this Polonius.
It comes into play a little bit later, but it's like weird. Yeah.
He's very savvy. Like he's very
Laertes and Ophelia aware. Kiss on the mouth a couple of times.
They sure fucking do.
I thought Polonius was about to kiss Laertes on the mouth. Mm-hmm. And then he goes for the forehead, but it's like a long scene of him grabbing Laertes' face. I'm like, is this just a family that kisses each other on the mouth? Is this Tom Brady? And then we have a very abrupt change of scene for Polonius' speech, too. It's just like they're walking outside and then they're just in the chapel place.
Yeah, where all of a sudden he like turns into Batman in the interrogation scene and like shoves Ophelia onto the bench and is like, what have you been doing with Hamlet?
And while he's talking to Ophelia about her relationship with Hamlet, we get a sex cutaway. Because again, whenever someone's talking about something, we have to see it.
Right.
We have to see it.
It's never explicitly said in the original text of Hamlet that Ophelia and Hamlet have sex.
Yeah, but I feel like with her songs in Act 4...
It's more, it is more applied. Like you can see the thing for it.
He took her virginity.
It's just, is it by putting her next to him, it makes him look, does he think it makes him look younger? Because I think it actually has the opposite
Makes him
effect.
look much older.
It makes him look much, 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 much older.
So we end up back out on the ramparts. We're going to meet the ghost again.
Gotta meet the ghost.
And that's where that cannon goes off. And Kenneth Branagh talks about the wedding tradition. And again, we cut away to it. So we see Jacoby running through the halls and all the attendants and everyone as they're drinking, and he's going to run to bed. This is a very literal movie.
Yes. It's literally like beat by beat, just the play. And but with little understanding of what makes the play work.
Cutaways and little flashbacks. And they're not there's this funny conversation that goes on in the commentary where it's like, is the flashback Polonius's idea or is it Ophelia's idea? It's no one's idea. It's a cold, omniscient narrator saying, this is what happened in the past. Now we're back in the present. There are no flashbacks that are in someone's head. Every flashback that happens is just a flashback that the movie is showing you.
And we also don't get into any characters' heads, which is another one of the big problems of this thing.
There's a couple little voiceovers, but that doesn't count. You'd think it might count. It doesn't here.
And when things get scary or things get thriller-esque, I believe when they all start doing choreography as zombies, when things get thriller-esque, there's a point where Branagh's only direction to them is just maybe scream every line.
So, as we see with this ghost, and I mean, this is a screamy scene anyway. It's not super long. You can get away with it. You want to build up the tension.
Yeah.
It happens in other places, and we'll see that.
I just think a way to justify that would be to have like wind blowing like really, so they have to like scream to hear each other, but it's just silent.
Or I mean, they even play with the earth crumbling and things like that. So it could be them talking over these horrible sounds that are
the world tearing itself apart. Yeah.
Again, it's where is this ghost? Where are they looking?
Yeah, up. They're looking up, kind of like right below the camera.
But they're looking up, and the composition of this the reshoot shots of Brian Blessed and or a body double don't relate to each other in any way. And we see no scene, we see no framing at all where we have both the subject and the ghost, which just doesn't really make good sense. You want to give a sense that this thing is intruding on the world with them like a ghost does.
Yes. And that it is like the reason the ghost is here, it has to fight against literal nature itself in order to tell this message.
And again, it's like you're already doing these cutaways of things that they don't have a relationship to. They're talking about the wassailing or whatever. This ghost feels like that because you're already doing that. So you're already making a cinematic language that is creating a disconnect between characters that are sharing the same space. Right? The power of something like Hamlet at the Globe Theater was that there was a ghost there was a person there. And the ghost may have been up in the balcony. It may have been among the audience on the ground.
Yeah.
They make concrete references to different parts of the architectural structure of that theater.
Sure.
And it's because, it makes sense to do it.
Yeah. And it's also,
I mean, it's not just that, it's like, because in the theater, in the Elizabethan era, they could have not had a ghost on stage. They could have just had voices coming in through the walls or thunderclaps or something like that. And they chose to put a ghost on the stage. It's not just that it was the only option they had.
So, Brian.
And it's not that you can't, you can make a different choice, but again, this makes no justification for it at all because it sucks. Sorry, AJ.
No. So, Brian, we talked a lot, I think, in the Hamlet 2000 episode about how great Sam Shepard's performance is in that and making it makes the ghost work and viscerally terrifying by just putting him in a room and having him talk.
He just sits in a chair. Yeah.
He just sits in a big comfy chair and talks. And how it is one of the biggest challenges to staging Hamlet is how do you make a ghost scary? How do you make the ghost scary? How successful do you think this film is at making the ghost scary?
I will give them the little moment with the sword in the first shot of the movie.
A little jump scare, yeah.
It stops there. When we get into the real ghost scene, the actual ghost talking, right? Kenneth Branagh runs out of the gate, and this is another product of post-production, I guess, because I guess they had him at the gate saying that, be thou a spirit of health or goblin damned.
Yeah.
Be thy intense wicked or charitable. And then running out. And then they're like, no, he should be saying it while he's running out. But they didn't shoot him saying it when he was running out when that happened. So they just made the parts where he's asking questions of another person into a voiceover.
Yeah. When he's just running through the woods. The ground is cracking and a fog machine is just spurting up through it, which is, I guess, supposed to be very scary.
It's fucking
garbage.
It's so bad. This was the same DP as like Labyrinth, and it feels kind of like Labyrinth. It feels like the never-ending story. Yeah. And you'll see that Branagh with CGI fares about the same as he does with practical effects. Enough champagne to fill the Nile has so much terrible green screen going on, and it's like, it's not the green screen, it's Ken.
Yeah, it's the way it's being used and shot. And I think those special effects work for me in Labyrinth and Neverending Story because there's a fairy tale quality to it, and there is a certain level of like fakeness I'm willing to buy.
We have this movie that otherwise has no special effects.
Yeah.
You're just in big rooms, so you need the special effects to be especially concrete. You
Yes.
really need them to land. And there's apparently a bunch that they cut there because they were too goofy. And it's like, well, should have gone further.
Yeah. I think the only part for me that actually is scary are the blue contacts they've put into the ghost's eyes.
Oh my God. So Brian Blessed is one of those, I mean, truly larger than life actors. He has deep brown eyes.
Yeah.
And they decided to put contacts in his eyes, which are obviously contacts.
Yeah.
Because they decided to shoot close-ups of him in 65 millimeters.
Yeah. Oh, no, absolutely. But it's supposed to be uncanny in this. What gets weird is when he shows a photo of
The thing is, he's
him.
always wearing the contacts.
Yeah, it's
when
not
he's
like he's
alive,
dead.
he's wearing the contacts.
Yeah, so
it's not a
doesn't-
ghost contact. It's a make Brian Blessed more Danish contact. And what a waste of Brian Blessed's talent, because they just have him whisper the whole time.
Yeah, and it's impossible to understand what's happening.
Here you get the loudest, boomingest man on earth, and he just whispers. While we cut away to shots of his ear rotting or the ground breaking apart, and it's the same shot of the ground breaking apart over and over and over again, shaking
It's a long
trees,
speech. The ghost has a long fucking speech.
dry ice out on the moors.
Yeah. The dry ice budget actually surpassed the film budget on this movie. But
It's 70 millimeter dry ice.
the thing I clung on to most is that this is actually a play about increasingly wacky poisons.
Ear poison is very, you can get off on just the weirdness of it.
And I
when
do.
you're doing a play where it's like, in my ear, and it's like, ooh, fucking, like what?
Yeah.
But when you see it,
Yeah.
it's so dumb.
It is very dumb, especially when they make the poor man like die like for a long time.
You watch Brian Blessed do a little like shocked, and it's so comic.
Yeah. And he's got
And he
boils
falls off of
bubble
he
up
falls
on
off
his
of
ear.
his like porch chair that he has out in the snow.
Yeah. Well, and whereas in Hamlet 2000, I said this in that episode, but it's like the idea that like this is a poison that clots your blood and makes your heart stop is something I got very, very clearly for the first time from that movie. Watching this movie,
it does not clot your blood. It does the opposite. He
Yeah.
starts bleeding out.
yeah, and it also, because he's whispering every single line in a very creepy way, it's impossible to actually tell what he's saying almost at all, because all the words blend together because there can't be the emphasis that iambic pentameter fucking demands in order to be under fucking stood. So I think they set him up to fail in this movie.
But we also see all the happy times that Hamlet the Greater and Gertrude had together. We see them curling, like playing the game curling in the hallway.
Yeah, gotta put that rock in the
all of this
house.
stuff is done in that bad slow-mo that we were talking about with Heart and Soul, where it's frame. They copy frames instead of actually over cranking the camera.
Yeah.
So it's artificial and it's.
Do you mean heart condition?
Dopey. What did I say?
You said heart and soul.
Oh, heart. No, that did not happen in Heart and Souls.
Yeah.
Which I did bring up in the heart condition episode. Because the thing with Hamlet is he starts to pretend to be crazy after this.
Yes.
Right? That's part of his thing. He's like trying to figure out what's going on by holding everyone at arm's length and being a little wacky.
Yes.
It seems like he's already doing it with these guys the moment the ghost leaves.
Right,
Even
right,
though
right.
they're the ones who are part of his inner circle who he says, don't tell anyone what I'm about to do. I'm about to act crazy. So this is Hamlet being nuts in a very fake way.
It actually, it feels like it's when Branagh's having the most fun is when he gets to be his version of crazy, which I'm sorry to say, if anyone out there has seen Slings and Arrows season 1, but the woman who plays the original Ophelia, who thinks that playing Madness is just getting super stoned, like it has that level of like comic absurdity to it. Like it is, no one in a minute would ever buy that this guy was actually crazy and not just putting it on. Like it's so clear that he's acting, especially once the players come in, which is not quite yet.
Yeah, he's just doing bits.
We haven't mentioned Horatio yet. The actor who plays Horatio, completely indecipherable for most of the movie. He is also in the Branagh camp of just like of recitation. He's just getting all the words out and he's acting very hard, but I don't know what he's saying.
So then we get Gerard Depardieu, who's actually quite good in this.
He is.
I have to say.
The 5 to 6 minutes that he's in this movie.
Weird scene where they decide that Polonius needs to be sleeping with a hooker, I guess. Everything that those two are talking about is so long and it weighs in no manner on any other part of the movie because it doesn't go back to Norway. It doesn't, it's just...
It's to remind you Laertes is a character,
Yeah.
I guess.
Even though he just left.
He
It's like you
literally
should
just
put
left.
this in a few scenes later, I guess.
Yeah, and it's also shown that Polonius is a puttering old fool, which this movie also disposes of entirely. Even
No, he's just a schemer in this movie, really.
Yeah, even in a scene, like, what was I saying? What was I saying? Can you tell me what I was saying? It's like he's testing him.
It feels like it comes out of nowhere, yeah.
Yeah, well, it feels like he's testing him to be like, are you paying attention to what I'm saying, as opposed to I am bumbling over myself. But it also makes the scene make no goddamn sense, because it's supposed to be comic relief, right? We have this big, scary moment of the ghost.
That's the only reason to keep it is like if you really have a nice way to play that moment where Polonius is just talking and talking and talking, and it's like, what was I?
You remember what I was saying? Tell me what I was saying. I know what I was saying, but do you know what I'm saying? Like, it's just like it could be very funny.
It could be funny. It's not.
This is inert. This is just a dead fish of a scene.
Yeah.
For a fishmonger.
We get another cutaway to Norway. Yeah, we have this whole thing where the matter with the, I don't know, ambassadors or messengers or fucking whatever. Norway talks to Fortinbras and gives him money.
Big maps on the table. Fortinbras angry. He wants Poland.
The Black Void.
The boy howls.
So like Ophelia has shown up in Polonius's chambers and is like, Hamlet showed up in my room. He's all fucked up. And Polonius was like, oh, I thought this guy just wanted to bone you. He's actually in love. Like, he's crazy.
Yeah, he's
gone
crazy
completely insane because you turned him down because I told you to. And that love has made him nutty. So he brings Ophelia over to Gertrude and Claudius. He's like, I know what's causing all the trouble. Hamlet's being annoying. It's got nothing to do with his dad who just died.
Yeah, no.
And you getting married within 2 months of that happening. Yeah. It's because he's just in love with Ophelia. Look, he wrote all these letters to my daughter. And Ophelia starts reading the letters. And I love you, Kate Winslet, but oh my God, just read just get it done. Yeah. This scene is 5 minutes of you crying between every word.
Here's the thing, though. Kate Winslet, at least I understood, like, she is very good at making you understand Shakespeare's language. And I think that's because she didn't have...
That's the benefit of having someone who's not a Shakespearean actor.
Absolutely. Yeah. And she is one of my favorite parts of the movie, but I do agree that well, that's the thing.
It's not her fault. It was directed to be
She's just been given too many lines.
Yeah.
Because these lines should be cut. Like, Hamlet was never presented in its original time at this length.
No.
It was never intended to be presented at this length. So of course you have bloated filler and the pacing's all over the goddamn place, because this isn't what people saw. This isn't the play. This is
a lot of this was like for publication. So we get another cutaway where the letter gets finished by Kenneth Branagh in the boudoir. So Polonius is like, so Kenneth Branagh loves to come through the lobby of this castle. Kenneth Branagh himself. No more Hamlet. It's just Kenneth Branagh.
It's just going to be Kenneth Branagh, yeah.
Kenneth Branagh is having sex with my daughter. Yeah. He's like, he likes to come through the lobby here every day at like noon or whatever to read a book. Yeah. And just like clockwork, there he is. And so Polonius is like, I'm going to talk to Kenneth Branagh. And I'm going to tell Kenneth Branagh, I'm going to see if he's insane because he's in love with my daughter. So now we have this parallel plot, right? Hamlet is trying to figure out if Claudius actually did the murder so that he can carry out the revenge. And
who knew what when?
And Polonius is like, I have my answer. I just need to prove that Hamlet's insane because he's crazy in love.
Yes.
So this is the time when Hamlet has to be funny.
It sure is.
And Kenneth Branagh tries to be funny. Apparently he's a naturally funny guy because everyone's always laughing on the set.
Sure.
Does not come through.
No.
In this.
And again, all of his problems would have been fixed with a different director who could have said, hey, maybe less. Or
he decides to make words into a gag, which you can do or not do. Some people do it well. David Tennant did it very well.
He sure did.
But Branagh's way of doing it is just by making a funny face when he says words the third time.
His lips emerge from their shell and do a nice little diagonal across from each other.
He contorts his mouth and says, words.
Yeah.
And that's supposed to be
that's the comedy.
Joke.
Because to Shakespeare nerds, saying the words funny is comedy, I think. Because you don't want to add anything. You don't want to add the bits. And I mean, look.
Oh God, no.
We also adding stuff to Shakespeare to make it funny, mostly in the form of hip thrusts, is a cliche for a reason. And it's pretty much
there's
mostly
no real
bad.
dick grabs in this one.
There aren't any. There's the closest actually we get is actually horrifying because it's Ophelia fucking a Hamlet that's not there.
Yeah, so she does hip thrusts, but not as a joke.
Yeah, no, it's
that
actually
horrible costume.
deeply. Yeah, we'll get to that costume.
So yeah, Branagh doesn't know how to be funny. He does like the accept my life bit and he just pushes it, and he just hopes that if he pushes it hard enough, people will start laughing.
Yeah.
Which maybe they do on set, but it doesn't work for this expert in comedy right here.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it also doesn't work for me because without a doddering Polonius, the jokes don't land.
Mm-hmm.
They actually don't make any sense.
And Polonius starts to dodder at the end of all of this section after Charlton Heston shows up. And it's like, oh, what could have been?
Absolutely.
So Hamlet has these two friends from Wittenberg, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, who are recruited to spy on him. And so we see them with the throne room. Then they scurry off, and they're going to pretend that they're arriving in Denmark the moment that they meet Hamlet.
Yes.
And so in this, they ride in on the little tiny train from the Avengers that almost ran over Dame Diana Rigg.
We are not referring to the Marvel Avengers. We
were talking about the British television show with the famous episode where Diana Rigg is almost run over by a train conductor retiree with the smallest steam train in the world. These men are actually not riding on a steam train. It is a diesel-powered train. And I found out, I was like, did they go to that rail yard from the Avengers? No.
Yeah.
This is on the grounds of that castle.
They just found that?
It was sitting there, so they decided to use it. So you know what? That's good. That's spontaneity.
That's really, Brian, that's actually really interesting because you texted me while watching the movie being like, are we going to talk about the train? And I said, why? And you said, that's my question. Why this train?
You had been watching special features, and I was like, did anyone mention the train? Because this is fucking weird.
Well, here's the thing.
They just show up on a tiny train.
It's really baffling to me because you've provided that explanation of they just found it on the grounds, and I actually found completely different intel about why they used the train. And it was because there was actually, believe it or not, a thing that Branagh cut from Hamlet, from this movie.
Okay.
It was a musical number, and it turns out that I found the lyrics to it, and I'd like to recreate it for you now, if I could. Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, the bros of the railway train. There's a whisper down the line at 11:39 as Kenneth Branagh holds in a fart, saying, Rosen, where is Rosen? He's probably out there frozen on the tundra where the train won't start. And as for gentle Guildenstern, he'll just have to wait his turn, even though I consider him a mensch. 'Cause while Hamlet can't stop speaking, the two of us are sneaking round the parapet so we can French. Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. I mean, you get it, right? Do you get the song?
No. You're fired.
I told you Cats is coming
back. Again.
I shot my shot. I set
Why
it up.
would I know a song from Cats? I don't go out of my way to seek out Cats content. I've never heard this song in my life. There's a train song?
Yes,
in Cats?
Skibbleshanks.
That's so fucking stupid.
The
That's
cat
so
on the railway
fucking
train.
stupid. What a stupid fucking musical that you're wasting everyone's time with. You did that whole thing that was 2 minutes long.
It was not 2 minutes long. It can't.
You
have
need
been
to
2
go
minutes
to
long.
a church. You need to convert to, I don't care what kind of a church, but you need to find some kind of higher power because you're in a lot of trouble. Like your immortal soul is in danger.
Would you say that now would be an ideal time for Hamlet to kill me?
Now would be an ideal time for anyone to kill you.
Look, I'm proud of the internal rhyme of Rosen and Frozen myself, but you know.
I've given up. I say let COVID kill everyone, especially you and especially me and especially you.
Viewers, I think this is actually probably a pretty good time to take our break so Brian can...
We're going to have our intermission much sooner than Kenneth Branagh did.
Well,
That's
he puts it in a weird place, too. He puts it like
in the worst place.
It's the absolute worst place to put the intermission.
Yeah, so we're going to have a break, and I don't even know if I'm going to let AJ write this commercial. He's on thin fucking ice.
Hey everybody, Josh here. I'm out this week with the novel Coronavirus, but just wanted to pop in real quick and give a few of my thoughts on today's topic. And so without further ado, here's my review of Kenneth Branagh's William Shakespeare's Hamlet. I haven't seen it. Looks like it's bad, though. And now back to the show.
Of all the riches that musical theater has on offer, the only thing you ever reference is not only Andrew Lloyd Webber, but Andrew Lloyd Webber's cats.
Yes.
That's it.
I mean,
What happened to you?
But Brian,
What Freudian thing did this movie stir up in your horrible little mind?
Brian, can I answer your question with another question?
You just did that.
Great, I'm going to do it again.
Okay.
Are you blind when you're born?
You actually like it. That's the problem. You actually like cats.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, you
I think
do.
I could probably say
Yeah,
I do.
you do.
Yeah.
Probably no. This does not come from hatred. You just wrote a verse and a chorus of lyrics.
Yeah. But to be fair, the chorus is only 2 lines long.
We're not going to be fair. I have no interest in being fair.
Okay.
Andrew Lloyd Webber killed a cat. He murdered his own cat.
Yeah, I mean, probably.
He should not be praised for his musical on the subject.
What is more painful? Talking about a musical that is that grotesquely bad or this boring 4-hour trek?
No, Cats is worse. Yeah, Cats is worse than that.
All right.
Because I can at least turn this on in the background and it won't bother me.
That's true.
You can't do that with Andrew Lloyd Webber.
No.
He will always fucking bother you. He'll always show up. His weird fucking little face will emerge from the bogs and say, "What are you doing tonight, stranger?
Well, what's funny?
What are you doing tonight?"
But he's not Irish.
That's not Irish.
But why would he be
He's
emerging from a
Cockney.
bog if he wasn't Irish?
There's bogs in England.
No,
there's bogs and there's quicksand.
That's a Moy people thing. We own the bogs.
No, there are bogs in England.
Oh, probably, but we own it. We're bog people.
Google it right now.
No, we're the
where,
bog
where are the
people.
bogs? You're all bog people. I include myself in this. I have
You all.
Anglo-Irish background as well. There are plenty of bogs on the horrible bog islands.
Listeners, can you tell how much we want to not talk about this movie?
So much of this movie is just filling space.
Yeah.
You just have to get through the text. And especially in speeches, it's just because there are rewards to it. There are moments in little pieces of dialogue where it's like, oh, wow, that sounds kind of modern. Oh, I see how that relates to the larger intrigue or whatever that usually gets ignored.
Yeah.
And can be illustrative or revelatory. But the speeches, it just becomes words. This is why the first scene
Words,
of almost
words.
every Shakespeare play is bad, because it's just words.
Yeah.
And when it tries to do more, it just tries to overwhelm you with expenses.
Yes.
Like the flower petals or the detergent snow or things that aren't actually...
Or the celebrity cameos.
They don't overwhelm you as the audience member, but they're trying really hard to do that.
Yeah.
And here we'll get to the great celebrity cameo of the players showing up and Hamlet having his big idea to use a play to catch the king's conscience. And he sees these players who are all dressed as Dickensian carolers.
For some reason.
And he talks to the player king, a one Mr. Charlton Heston.
Who is phenomenal in this movie.
Yep. This is why you hire Americans.
A real freak in real life. But holy fucking
absolute
shit.
fucking loon, like incoherent, probably even at this point starting to get a little senile.
But the man,
But
the man could
just-
retain this Shakespeare, and this is
Good God.
Yeah, and as you said, like the small little bounties that you get from doing the whole text, I think are on full display in this scene in particular.
Which is never the case.
Yeah.
In this play. It's because when you're doing this play, you're not going to have someone with the caliber of Charlton Heston playing this role.
Yeah.
This otherwise minor role where it's going to be bundled up with other small roles.
Right.
But because of the benefit of doing a movie, you do get this one truly inspired moment.
Yeah.
Of Charlton Heston reading off this this speech that was probably from Troilus and Cressida that got cut.
And Judi Dench makes a nice cameo.
Well, and Judi Dench makes a cameo, so does John Gielgud.
Yeah.
Those fall on the other side of the spectrum.
Yeah.
Because they're, again, in the story, we have to get literal. We talk about striking too short at Greeks, Pyrrhus and Priam. We see John Gielgud in another almost black void, leaning against a wooden pillar.
It felt kind of like a Lynchian, like Red Room situation.
Oh, totally. Yeah, no, because Lynch just kind of plays with that cheapness.
Yeah.
Because he really loved Ed Wood.
Yeah.
And you get a scene of Judi Dench crying.
Yeah, and I don't think Judi Dench has a single line of dialogue in this.
No. She just cries because she's just in the story. She doesn't. There's no line for her to have.
She's serving some real Roman tragic realness.
She's just Niobe. Wait, no, Hecuba.
She's Hecuba, yeah.
Niobe is also famous for crying, so it's just right. The whole point of that scene is that the actor starts crying. Whatever.
Yeah.
So Charlton Heston does this. You also get to Rosemary Harris. We love to see Aunt May.
We do love to see Aunt May.
This moment is fine, and Branagh, as he talks to the players, as he's introducing the speech, he gets to be a stage actor in that moment.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, there he is. There's Hamlet.
Yeah, well,
there's an actual person standing in front of me now.
Yeah, because he's talking about a thing he loves. It's like somebody cornered Branagh and said, hey, tell me about why Hamlet's great.
And again, they shouldn't have had Gielgud or Dench here because they should have just had Heston.
Yeah, because he carries it. It's one of those things, like, I could just watch him. I actually would get mad when it would cut away because I was just like, you're taking me away from the goods.
It feels like they shot the cutaways later and had run out of money. Like they just, there's no walls.
Yeah. There aren't any walls.
They're so cheap and they're not elaborate. So
Wild.
We get to be or not to be. Polonius and Claudius are spying on Hamlet. They have Ophelia hiding under a stairwell. The way this movie does things, because you rarely ever leave the fucking main courtroom, even though it's a movie.
Yeah, they spent a lot of money on that set and they're going to make every penny count.
It's like Joe Wright's Anna Karenina was explicitly set in a theater and they still used more rooms in that building.
Yep.
than they did here.
That movie also rules. I love that movie.
I love that movie. They hide instead of behind an arras. They hide behind.
And then Sephiroth comes down and stabs her through the chest. And
so they hide behind a mirror because there's all these mirrors that we're going to use that are also doors. They're very brightly lit behind that mirror, which would mean that you would see them. Whatever.
Sure.
The whole movie is just way too brightly lit. It's very 90s. It's just like high key lighting everywhere. Yeah. So Hamlet stands in front of a mirror and just
slowly walks towards the mirror. To be or not to be. We've talked about it before, but just how it's like, it's not where the emotion comes from, right? That's a case you just got to ride the text. But there's two objectives that you can choose when you play Hamlet in this scene. Either he's aware that Claudius and Polonius are spying on him from the word go, and he's doing to be or not to be to prove his madness and to fake his madness, or he has no idea and he's just contemplating his mortality and whether or not he wants to take his own life, and he's doing it as soliloquy.
The second one is the right one, by the way.
Yes, correct.
But worse than that, we always tend to take a third choice, which is let's do to be or not to be now. And that's the choice this movie certainly makes. I know the Benedict Cumberbatch production of Hamlet that they did a few years back opened the show with it, which I can kind of respect because it's like we're just doing the let's do to be or not to be now. And also we're just getting it out of the fucking way. We're not going to put it in the body of the rest of the play.
Right.
Like, so it doesn't distract anyone. People got mad, so they had to put it back because they're fucking English.
Sure. And you can't do anything out of order.
You can't do anything
out of order.
Fucking. Unless you explicitly do it based on the first quarto, and then they're like, they're doing the first quarto now, which is what
is back. Hey, Columbus.
And it's what the David Tennant one did too.
I prefer triangle myself.
But here we go, and he's just looking at a mirror, and we get music underneath, and it's just like, look at how pretty the Shakespeare words are, and he's doing Shakespeare words right now. Anyway, that's enough of that, I think.
Because the choice that so here's where Branagh's entire interpretation of Hamlet falls apart at the seams, right? In this version, he does not know that they're behind the mirror. Yeah. Because he finds it out later.
And he
in
makes
the
right
scene.
decision about where he finds out. I think that is absolutely the correct way working from the text.
Right, but if you have a Hamlet that's not melancholic, this monologue makes absolutely no goddamn sense.
It's so weird. It's so weird when it happens, and it's like, well, I guess that's the thing from this play, so they're doing it.
Yeah.
But it's just like, we've not been up to this shit.
Yeah.
Like the lines about stale promontory and all that have been completely glossed over.
Right.
His losing of his mirth and everything.
Because he hasn't lost his mirth.
Here's the speech. Here's the words of Shakespeare in glorious 70 millimeter with a mirror.
Yeah, he talks a lot in his interviews about how he sees a Hamlet that is popular, that, you know, and people describe him as being popular, and how he would have made a great king had he not been in Wittenberg and had ascended the throne. But it misses the fact that everyone says that how much he's changed.
Well, his popularity is with the common people who don't know him personally, right?
Sure.
Unless they're watching his TikToks.
Yes.
And
oh man. His
would have the most annoying TikToks. I mean, that would be more the Ethan Hawke Hamlet.
Yeah, absolutely.
All shot on Pixel Vision.
Yeah.
That would be if I get into TikTok. I was like, I shot this TikTok on film.
And I had it developed and then I shot it frame by frame. So for me, this is the point where the entire interpretation falls apart entirely, because you have to have a Hamlet who has to contemplate, if you want to keep the speech, he has to contemplate his mortality.
That's because the interpretation is not of a character. It is of Hamlet as a work of literature to be preserved in this fucking museum piece.
In this amber stone,
This is the movie equivalent of that fucking Stratford production of Oedipus that Tyrone Guthrie directed in 1957, where it's just like, this is what the Greeks were. I mean, you know, they try to make it a full recreation on a Canadian stage indoors. But what's so infuriating is that Branagh's like, he knows it's not supposed to be like Anglo-Saxon and hose and doublet and pumpkin pants.
Yeah.
He's like, oh yeah, that shit's boring.
Pumpkin pants.
But this is just the 20th century version of that. It's just slightly less Gothic. It's slightly less Anglo-Saxon, but it is very traditional, and it's very much built in like, this thing is giving you the library version of Hamlet on film.
Yes. And he actually goes out of his way to explain, again, in all these interviews, about how he wants this to be people's entry point to Hamlet. Like, he wanted to like open this, make Hamlet open up to the masses.
Which unfortunately it is.
Yeah. But that's also the reason why he didn't want to play him as melancholic, because he wanted to create a Hamlet that was more of an everyman. And Kenneth Branagh is like, but I don't understand depression, and therefore most people don't understand depression. So we're just going to cut that little, you know.
Especially not teenagers.
So
this just becomes a guy saying the lines of to be or not to be. Another way that this same problem was approached the same way and dealt with was Ingmar Bergman, who took Peter Stormare's speech to the players, right? Speak the speech, I pray you trippingly on the tongue, blah, 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 blah. And he talks about all the ways not to deliver it. And then he makes him give an example of how to deliver a speech. And that's the part where he has Peter Stormare as Hamlet say to be or not to be. And he does the entire speech as a speech, as instruction, because again, everyone's just sick of having to deal with this shit, and no one is brave enough to just do it. Which I gotta talk about. Did you see the thing about the Queen? How Andrew Lloyd Webber and Lin-Manuel Miranda are writing a song for the Queen.
Yeah.
Lin-Manuel Miranda,
oh boy,
wrote a musical about the American Revolution.
Yes,
and is now writing something for the Queen of England.
Yes.
Does our history mean nothing to you, man?
Well, Miranda.
That's very true.
Yeah.
Like, that's the one good thing about America's history, is that we're anti-monarchist. And then we have this twit fucking going and writing a song for the fucking Queen. It shouldn't even be allowed. What are they doing? Letting a foreigner from a country that had a successful revolution write this fucking thing. I get it. He's a climber, that one. He sets my teeth on edge. But at the same time, he and Andrew Lloyd Webber.
Well, I expect this from Webber. I mean, Webber's a monarchist.
Yeah, of course. Andrew Lloyd Webber. He's a fucking lord. He's not a human being. And he's like a COVID conspiracy theorist. He's a real piece of shit.
Yeah, he's a bad man.
And he killed his cat.
I am respecting your rule of no more cats references, but I need you to understand that it's killing me. Much like Andrew Lloyd Webber killed his cat. So Ophelia
this is
shows
extremely self-conscious. Yeah, we have Ophelia, and we do the Shakespeare drag. We do the thing where someone yells at someone in Shakespeare and drags them while they do it to make it more active.
Yeah, I saw them rehearse this scene, and he had to open they had to literally take a tape measurer between his head and the mirror to make sure that the mirror would not be seen as he opened the door. But the effect that it has is that Hamlet can't even see into the room that he's looking into, really?
Yeah, Hamlet, in a full rage, is hauling Ophelia's body across this enormous set and kind of opening a door, and then kind of opening another door, and then kind of opening another door.
Until he
so
smushes her
pathetic.
face on the glass in what I think is actually very funny. I think Kate Winslet's smoosh face is very silly.
They're trying it. They're trying to do something really, really intense, but this is not. He doesn't have that intensity. He doesn't know how to deliver that here.
No.
And again, you have this weird thing because he has slammed her body into this mirror.
Yeah.
That is also the window that Carambus and Claudius are looking through.
Yes.
So here's her father, Polonius, and he's staring straight at her with her face pressed against that glass. But again, we don't have a shot that has their relationship.
Right.
So it's a shot of the glass in abstract.
Yes.
And then a shot of Polonius and Claudius in abstract until the moment where they close the door and run off.
Yeah.
Where you actually see them all together. But that's where the actual power of that moment is really getting a sense of all of them all together.
Yes.
And again, we're not doing great with like 180-degree lines.
It's jumping all over the place.
The scene where Hamlet is like talking to Rosencrantz and Guildenstern earlier on is completely breaching that line over and over again. It's very disorienting.
Yeah.
And obviously not on purpose.
Yeah.
It's just this whole entire disconnected, dry, dull movie going for its greatest moment of intensity. He really wants Hamlet to be extremely unlikable by the midpoint of this film.
Yes.
And we get over to the play that's happening, and Hamlet has these asides to everyone as they're coming in. And here, these are not asides. These are delivered to everyone literally on the stage as the play is starting up.
Yeah.
And as the play is running.
Yeah.
He gets on stage while they're doing the show and is like describing their action to everyone.
Branagh does make this choice actually a lot in the movie, that a lot of private conversations are done out in the open in full view of the Danish people. Mostly, I think, because when Laertes comes back and is like bringing all of,
15 people.
Yeah, all of 15
in his
people.
rebellion.
Like, you've seen them before and you have a relationship with them before. But it makes a lot of the lines not make a whole lot of sense. Like, it
No, I mean, switch it up a little bit. I get the impulse. I get using some of it. But then, like, especially his parts with Ophelia, he's just shouting.
Yeah.
The whole time.
Yeah.
And it's like, it could go between him shouting something embarrassing and then him whispering something embarrassing, right? Like, allow there to be some kind of secrets and private game happening there rather than just this very irritating scene. This movie does get genuinely active in this scene, though.
Yeah.
Like, it's alive in the scene with the players. It's too hammy by the end. It's moon over my hammy.
Mm-hmm.
There's something actually going on. I love Claudius leaving the space and calling for light when the whole place is brightly lit at all times.
But it's done. So normally that line is him like having a panic attack, right? Like he sees the thing on stage and he says, I need light. I just need to breathe. Like, he's just trying to get out. But Derek Jacobi, who we have not really talked about in detail yet, but his performance as Claudius is, I think, one of the best in the movies. And I don't think I will see a performance of Claudius that's better than this one. He stands up having the panic attack after having seen the players on stage reenact him murdering his brother, basically, in this fake tale called The Murder of Gonzago. It is so long, the play.
It's extremely
that
long.
we watched them do. But he stands up.
Because again, we have to have every word.
You do have to have every word.
Every lipless word.
Claudius stands up. He has a panic attack. And then he realizes in that moment that he's fucked up. And he stares at Hamlet and he says, I need light. As if he knows exactly what that little fucker did to him. And he's going to get his vengeance. And he leaves the space. It gave me chills. Derek Jacobi is one of the only actors in this movie that I think really respects the verse enough to make you understand it. He emphasizes...
Yes, absolutely.
He emphasizes the word at the end of every line. I was never confused about what Claudius says in this movie. He was never reciting it. He was always making sure that it was understandable.
Then Branagh has to threaten his friends. He's not threatening.
He gets a flute.
So Claudius goes to confession and he starts praying. This is the whole scene. And they decide to do a fake out. Branagh stabs him in the face with his weird little letter opener knife.
A perfect revengeful vengeance right in the ear.
And then it's like, no, he was just fantasizing. Anyway, this is fine. Whatever. Hamlet goes to his mother and they have their scene. I'm not that. I don't much care for Gertrude in this, to be honest with you.
I
think she's a fine actress, but like
it's a tricky role, and I think this scene is such a roller coaster too, because the thing I always forget, and we've talked about Hamlet 2000. I've read the play so many times, but I always forget that Polonius is killed in like the first minute of the scene, and then the rest of the scene happens. It's extremely short dialogue. It's very, very weird for Shakespeare. And then it gets done, and then the scene keeps going. And this is where I wrote, every speech goes on forever. Yeah, it's sure.
While Polonius has to lie there.
Yeah, and when they reveal, so Hamlet comes in, he thinks that Claudius is behind the curtain. So he stabs through it. Turns out it's Polonius, because he just wanted to be he wanted to hear that hot goss. And when they pull the curtain off of Polonius's face, it's
a very goofy face.
He has the goofiest face you've ever seen. Yeah. It looks like his O face. It looks like he was doing something else in those curtains. That I normally reserve for triangles.
Yeah, this movie just keeps trying to be an epic. It's trying to be large at all times, but like it's just not Hamlet. Hamlet's just not a large play.
No.
Yeah, they'll talk about large stuff, but it's always people talking about it.
Yeah.
You don't get more than little glimpses of the larger political machine, which is why you actually make a play that doesn't really suffer when you cut all of it.
Yeah. Yeah. And there are grandiose things, the ghost and like all the supernatural shit that comes into that, but it's the exception rather than the rule. This is mostly about people in a room talking.
The ghost is like on ramparts and then in a one-on-one conversation. It's not a huge thing.
Well, it's also not Macbeth, right? It's not.
No.
It's not supernatural. It's
coven of witches in the bogs.
Yeah,
because they have bogs too. There's bogs everywhere. There's always a bog.
And it's all for me bog, me lovely, lovely bog, all gone for beer and tobacco.
It's a small and narrow play, and Branagh, of course, it's always fighting with that whole 70 millimeter epic. And it's like you can shoot a small, narrow story with 70 millimeters. Tarantino did it with The Hateful Eight,
right,
which is his only good movie. And
it's a play. The Hateful Eight is basically a play,
right? But he takes that soaring idea of like what 70 millimeter is, and like just really has fun with it in these really cramped settings, whereas this is both too big and too small for what it wants to be, because it still keeps trying to be Dr. Zhivago.
Yeah.
And that play about the Austrians, whatever the fuck that one's called.
Sound of Music.
Pre-World War I Austrians. That movie, I mean, sorry. Whatever, fuck it. He has this scene that almost starts to work where he's running away and he's running through all of the different side rooms and the guards are chasing after him.
Yeah, because they set this up throughout the movie that there are these little secret passages in this place, but it's never used interestingly. Like,
no.
Later on,
it's just like somehow every room gets used right by the main atrium.
Yeah. And there is a cool idea here that they present a little bit later where you open a door and it's a padded cell where they throw Ophelia. Oh,
I didn't think that was cool at all. I thought that was very stupid.
Well, here's the thing.
Why would they make a padded room right next to the
Well, that's the thing.
throne room?
Like, had they set it up that when you open a door, there was a different thing there every time. Like, and that there was like sort of like a weird devolving like architecture
like the
thing.
Winchester House.
Yeah, like just some really like cool supernatural stuff. Then it would have worked. But as it stands,
the padded room is a conversion though, because it's just mattresses.
Right.
They just taped mattresses.
Oh, really? I thought it was actually like it was a room specifically.
No, there's
padded.
mattress. You can see the
It also teleports because at one point they're looking through a chessboard into the padded room, but then it's also just offside the atrium. So it's like the architecture gets really wonky. But anyway, Hamlet first hides Polonius's body. Gertrude's like, hey, Claudius.
We don't need to get into much of this, I don't think.
It's funny because, on stage you don't really have any questions about it, but when you watch it, this literal version of it, the blood would lead directly to Polonius's body. The amount of blood that's been like...
Well, he says follow the smell. He kind of points them in the general... It's a large castle, even though we don't see much of it. But Hamlet, and then he leaves. But he leaves with Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. He gets hauled out.
Yes.
because he's supposed to go to England. It's like, just go to England. You'll chill out. We'll let this bowl over.
Put you in an asylum.
Give the letter.
Yeah.
You're going to kill him. He goes to England with Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. That's where we get the plane in Denmark, where he's by himself.
Just kind of walking around.
Yeah, this speech is not in every version of this script. And he runs into Fortinbras. There was a point after he drags Polonius off, because like there's two main places you want to put your intermission. It's either usually after the play, within the play, or it's after Gertrude, the scene where he kills Polonius and he's with Gertrude.
Yes.
And he's at this point, and I'm just like, there's just no intermission. I can't believe they put out a 4-hour movie
to give you time to pee.
That's supposed to be an epic, and there's no intermission, because epics have intermissions. And then he does the now all occasions do conspire against me thing. He's on a very bad blue screen.
Yeah, it's real bad.
He's out in Denmark. The camera zooms out forever. This is a very dark speech.
Yeah.
This is a speech about how he's consigning himself to finally, like, I'm going to kill people to get what I need done.
Yeah.
And the music is soaring.
Well, he
turns into this tiny.
Yeah.
It's Henry V. It's the fucking like Act 1 closing speech from Camelot. It's Scarlett O'Hara eating clay. As God is my witness, I will never go hungry again.
Yeah.
And then, only now, like 3/4 of the way through the movie, there's an intermission card.
And then you check the...
You imbecile!
You check the time code, and you're like, there's still an hour and a half of this movie. There's an entire other movie of this movie left. And in your head, you're like, they've covered so much of the plot of Hamlet already. What else is there at this point?
Well, there's a lot of scenes where people sit completely still and talk about a French guy.
Yeah, there's a lot of that. My favorite part about that speech where Kenneth Branagh just screams into the ether about, may my
thoughts be bloody or be nothing worth.
Or be nothing worth. The camera is zooming out and giving this huge panoramic shot, so he has to scream it. But I also like to think that it's just the camera guy slowly backing away from Hamlet, just being like, yeah, sure, all occasions do inform against you. Yeah, it's cool, man. Yeah. And you gonna say you do not know why you say the things you do? Oh, that's fine. I'm just gonna you're cool though, right? I'm just gonna go. We're very tired of watching your non-lips deliver these terrible lines.
Yeah, so Laertes leads a rebellion. Hamlet's gone. Laertes is back. And leads a rebellion, which is something that is in the text, but you never see it because you don't have enough people for the play to do that. Yeah. So we get a chance to see them, all 15 of them, in a room off to the side.
Yep.
For some reason. But they don't come into the room with him. It's such a weird thing where it's like, go all the way with it then.
Yeah.
Have your rebellion of Danes who are on the side of Laertes.
That whole crew of people. It is very also nice just to see a large group of people in that opening scene, in that coronation scene, where it's just like, oh, it's not just CGI, it's just a bunch of extras. Like to have all of them storm would be, pretty cool, but it's just Laertes and his buds.
Chlarly there was some sort of budget issue at play with when they could have all the extras that they could have.
So as we say, they threw Ophelia into a chessboard hell. Which is just doing
in a padded room
chess.
Just right off from the throne room.
Yep.
And she's in a terrible costume. She's in an absolutely horrific costume.
It looks like a very silly diving suit.
Yeah, they drag her out in this. I'm sure it's period appropriate, but then just don't do it period appropriate, guys.
Yeah.
She's in a straitjacket. Apparently they wanted her to piss in the middle of the room. Thankfully that didn't happen.
Yep. She does thrust the air. It is, I think her performance in this is really jarringly great.
It's just the movie is not supporting her in any way.
In any way whatsoever.
We get this one really gorgeous shot of a blizzard coming across the castle, right? There's actual snow falling. And I mean it, there's actual snow falling.
Yeah.
There was an actual blizzard that happened while they were at lunch. And they were like, we have to do something. We have to use this because it never snows in England ever.
We gotta go.
So they went and they were like, we don't have anybody, like who could have their scene memorized? They're like, well, let's do the fucking letter. Because he just reads it. He just wrote it down and he read it while the snow was falling because it's the only good shot in the fucking movie. I mean, it's not the only good shot, but it's the best shot in the movie.
Yeah.
Hamlet has this letter. He got abducted by pirates and then he got set free and now he's on his way back.
Yes.
Blah, blah, blah. And then we have people sitting in a room talking about a Frenchman.
Yep.
And no cutaway.
Yeah.
There's no cutaway when they're talking about the Frenchman.
Nope.
Because I guess they want Robin Williams to be a surprise or something. Gertrude comes in and she tells the story about how Ophelia died. And they don't do a cutaway for Ophelia either.
Yeah, I mean, we do have a scene,
which is interesting.
We do have a scene a little bit earlier where Laertes sees Ophelia for the first time, and she's in a nightgown now. She's not in that weird diving suit, and she sings her nonsense songs of "Hey Nani Nani," so on and so forth. And again, this scene.
Oh well, and of course those have cutaways. We see her having sex again with Kenneth Branagh.
Yeah, but I mean, she breaks my heart in this. Like it is. Yeah. It's a devastating scene to see her offering to like play with her brother, but not being able to even recognize really who he is anymore.
Yeah.
And, you absolutely buy what happens to Ophelia, which is she drowns herself.
Yep.
In this version, all the text makes it a little bit less clear until the gravedigger scene. But like, I kind of got lost in the language, and I was like, oh, maybe it does kind of sound like an accident. Like she may have just fallen in.
Here's the thing. No, she doesn't know what's happening to her. She doesn't commit suicide.
Yeah.
She dies having no clue what's going on.
Right.
It was very strange that they didn't do a cutaway for this one, because this one is where you will actually see a cutaway in other versions.
Right.
And this is the movie that is Cutaway City, just not for this one speech. No. I don't put much stock into the people who make it an argument of like, is Gertrude lying? There's no she's delivering a Seneca speech.
Yeah.
And it's when you do that, you're just talking about a thing that actually happened.
Yeah.
It's like if Charlton Heston is lying about Pyrrhus and Priam.
Right. And to Laertes' credit, I think that's such a hard role to play. We talk about it, how he's just all muscle and like, I think my ideal version of Laertes is a himbo, but like this guy is just all bluster and also very difficult to understand with the text. But I think his delivery of Ophelia drowned is good. Like I feel like it's not Kenneth Branagh, you think he'd be like screaming, tearing his hair out, but it's so simple, it's so small, it's just utter shock, utter complete incomprehension, and it rules.
And then we meet Billy Crystal,
and then here's Billy.
He's the gravedigger,
making those jokes, I would argue, work for the most part.
More or less, yeah. Both of them emphasize the word int for some reason.
Yeah.
I don't understand why.
It's Simon Russell Beale is the other gravedigger.
It's like thou dost lie int, to say to be int and say it is thine. You just say it. It's just a fucking preposition and a pronoun.
Yeah, well, it might be a memorization thing. It's like, and so,
but Branagh is doing it too. It's not just Billy Crystal. They're both emphasizing the int.
It's infectious.
And it's so jarring. It's terrible. It has no flow. Yeah. That's my criticism.
And that's the only criticism historically the gravedigger scene has ever had.
Gielgud famously said this scene never makes anyone laugh, except sometimes children. And he's like, I would know. I worked with the best.
Yeah.
I mean, he has George Rose in his production with Richard Burton,
right? And again,
that's a quiet audience for that scene.
I mean, again, well, at that point in the play too, the audience is exhausted because Ophelia's just fucking died.
Well, and it's just not that funny.
Yeah.
Shakespeare is writing jokes there, and those age differently than situational humor. So, like the scene between Hamlet and Polonius, when done decently, is funny all the time, even now.
Yes.
But jokes just aren't funny because we have different ideas for how jokes work.
Yeah.
It just happens. Too bad. It's an old play.
Yeah.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Sad.
Bye-bye, Billy. So Simon Russell Beale just, I guess, disintegrates into the air. We just never see him again. And then Billy Crystal.
Yeah, that's what he does. He goes to Johann's, which was apparently the name of a pub across the street from the Globe.
Oh, wow. That's funny.
Yeah, so Johann was a real guy.
We stand Johann.
There's like 3 speeches he does before Yorick that we usually cut.
Yeah.
Or before the Alexander speech. We'll keep that and then do Yorick. But like usually there's 2 where he's just watching the gravedigger, where he just keeps fucking talking.
Yeah.
And of course they're all here. Gang's all here. And Horatio
has to just stand and kind of nod his head and look, empathetic. But Branagh is also
I'm surprised we didn't get a cutaway to Alexander the Great.
Yeah, that's true. It's they didn't have the budget. They had all the Roman costumes, but they didn't have the time to transfer them to being Greek.
No Greeks.
Yeah, no Greek costumes. But he delivers all of these speeches, and he delivers them as a man so bored out of his skull. Until he can pick up someone else's skull and then pour the
shit out of that too. So yeah, we see Yorick. I think that actor is an old music hall guy. He was sort of British famous.
He leaves an impression, is what I'll say about that Yorick, even with no lines. Like
very interesting face.
Very stark, very stark. And when you see the skull he's holding in his hands, it looks like you buy it. You buy that was that guy's skull, which I think is very impressive. But he has, the very famous Hamlet, "Alas, poor Yorick, I knew him, Horatio."
Yep.
And in my estimation, this monologue is one of the most important ones in Hamlet, because it's the entire ending and tragedy of Hamlet hinges on this monologue. Hamlet has spent the entire play avoiding death, not dealing with the loss of his dad, because he has to he must revenge his father. So he doesn't have time to grieve really, because he has to just constantly be trying to,
it's
stab his uncle in the ear.
The reality of what what is natural when you're dealing with death, and he has had no opportunity to be a natural person.
Yeah, well, he's terrified
and so, that
of it.
Makes all of his ideas around death start to spiral out of control.
Yeah, and he's terrified of it because it's the great unknown, and it's the thing that is the propulsion of him for most of the play. There is apparently life after death, but it fucking sucks. His dad, who he thought was amazing, is in hell. There's all these occasions are literally informing against him.
Yeah.
And here it is in its most unpretentious terms. He is holding death in his hands. He is holding what happens to a human body after it decomposes. And he gets
no more of these grand ideas about Alexander just being the dirt to stop a beer barrel. This is
this is it.
This is him just facing it. Yeah.
And he gets so close to accepting his dad's death, and that maybe we all die and maybe that's okay. And then he's interrupted by Ophelia coming in and her body being buried. And it's the final point of no return.
Yeah.
He will never fully understand death until he's dead at the end of the play. And
although it still gives him, I think that this is an interesting way of looking at it, because it also gives you that motivation in the sparrow, the fall of a sparrow. There's a providence in it.
Yeah.
It's going to happen. It's not now. It'll still happen some point.
Yeah. We all end up the same, and maybe, the king's skull looks exactly the same as Yorick's skull.
Oftentimes, this is the most interesting scene of the play. If you're seeing it, it's very, it's just interesting. Graves are interesting.
Yeah.
The dynamics of it are interesting. And this scene happens in the movie.
Yeah, it sure does.
I have no notes on this scene.
It has never been clear to me that this Hamlet didn't give three shits about Ophelia.
I'm surprised anything was clear to you in this movie, because at this point my eyes were covered over with a film.
I hope it was 65 millimeter.
Hey. So a lot of Act 4 hinges on getting Hamlet to fence with Laertes.
Why did they make Laertes'
which they
hair
determined
that
that
it just looks like Lord Farquaad.
all they need to do to accomplish that is to get a Frenchman to praise Laertes too much or something. So
Yep.
the Frenchman shows up. I mean, this is something that's just very weird in the play anyway, but whatever. Yeah. It's colorful, I guess.
The fax machine shows up.
So this is Robin Williams. Oh my God, it's Robin Williams.
As a final bit of adrenaline to keep you through the end of the play, we throw in Robin Williams in here.
And he is very sedate in this.
He is.
What else can he be in Kenneth Branagh's Hamlet?
Yeah.
What else could he possibly be? I do like that Robin Williams keeps running right up to the edge of doing his gay voice.
Yeah. Just right up to the edge. Ooh.
And I don't mean the birdcage. I mean his stand-up comedy gay voice.
Yes.
And they try to do one gag with him. Not the hat thing. I mean, the hat thing happens, of course. But they try to do this one gag where he bows and his sword hits the chair behind him.
Yes.
And they just muff it. It's too short.
Yeah.
Too short at Greeks. It's like the sound effect gets stopped too fast. It's just weird. It's oh, you tried to do a joke. It's the idea of a joke, just like this is the idea of a movie.
Yeah, it's a gesture towards a joke. I mean, and you know what's really funny to me too is that they repurposed Osric's mustache to be Poirot.
Murder on the Orient Express made so much fucking money.
It sure
did. No one liked it.
No one
watched it, but yet everyone watched it because it had Johnny Depp, and you get all of Europe into the theater if Johnny Depp is in your movie.
So they fucking duel. Now,
And this is Kenneth Branagh just really wanted to be Errol Flynn, I guess. We have the whole setup where because Claudius has this thing where he's like, he's going to poison the sword, but he's also going to poison Hamlet's drink using the ceremonial pearl
to make like
thing.
a foolproof plan to like just get this kid dead.
Which just means that more people die, and he should have thought of that. But that moment where he offers the drink, he makes this big ceremony of it. He's like, take a drink, and Hamlet's like, maybe next round, is very funny.
Yeah.
Because they just kind of stand there for a second. The servants are like, what am I supposed to do? And Jacoby just kind of puts it back down and sits.
Yep.
They did it. They did a good bit.
They did a good bit. They do exist in this movie. And so
there's like 3.
This fencing match that happens basically has 3 phases to it. And I guess one of the rules of it is you have to get more and more nude as it goes along. They start out in full fencing gear, then they take off their hats.
Well, he gets sweaty. They have nipples, by the way. The armor, the fencing armor has nipples.
They were actually the base for the Batman and Robin films.
I think that just aesthetically, we were all moving towards nipples.
Yeah.
And people just associated it with Joel Schumacher because they were homophobes and didn't like that Batman movie. And they're like, oh, we can't put nipples on anything anymore.
Brian,
but
the moral arc of the universe,
we as a society, we're like, we're moving towards nipples.
Yeah.
And we still haven't recovered, unfortunately.
It gets progressively worse as Hamlet just absolutely like fucking owns Laertes.
Bizarre. They throw swords across the room.
Because in the play, Hamlet gets Laertes' sword from him after he's already been stabbed.
Somewhere in the fight, yes. They decide to bring this up to... They already turn it into feeling like it's life or death, even though Hamlet's not supposed to know that yet. Whatever.
Yeah, it's also, I mean, here's the other thing, is that it's a bad sword fight.
And Gertrude dies off screen.
Gertrude died on the return to her home planet.
And Robin Williams like, the queen! And we sort of see her off in the distance, and we don't go back to that.
Yeah, you do get a wonderful moment when she drinks the poison instead of Hamlet, where
Jacoby screams.
Yeah, Jacoby goes, Gertrude! And you see his whole life falling before him, and she's just like, what? And she drinks it, whereas in the Hamlet 2000, she made the purposeful choice of she knows it's poison and she's going to do it, which is incredible.
Both are good. Yeah.
So she dies on the way back to her home planet. Meanwhile, Fortinbras has arrived at the gates of Elsinore.
Yeah, we have 100,000 soldiers marching on the castle, and no one inside is aware of it.
Nope.
Robin Williams leaves the room. He gets stabbed.
One of the guards gets Assassin Creeded, like his neck just like gets snapped, like he's been snuck up on somehow. Like Altair just like lunged off the top of the gate and stabbed him in the throat.
So the invasion is happening. Finally, we have extras. We have a lot of extras. And it's Dr. Zhivago.
It's every extra known to man.
Hamlet's gotten, Laertes' sword. He cuts him, which is going to kill him anyway. But instead, they decide to go a step further, and they throw Laertes off a balcony.
Yeah, well, actually, here's the thing about that actually works for me, is that it explains why Laertes dies first, even though Hamlet was stabbed first.
Yeah, sure, I guess.
So I bought it, but no, he
could just get a worse cut. I don't fucking whatever.
Yeah, but it's also just like he's so far away and he's whispering all these lines to Hamlet, and Hamlet's not going, what?
Up atop. Yep. Gertrude died because she drank the wine. Hamlet's dying. And then he throws his sword.
Oh, it's so good.
Across the entire castle.
I wanted more of this. I wanted more of this fucking slapstick,
I wanted less of
insanity
this.
Violence.
No, this is so bad.
It's so unjustified in the text.
Because again, it's the idea of a movie.
Yeah.
This is what happens at the climax of a movie. Therefore, it's going to happen at the climax of this
Specifically
movie.
like a 90s action movie. Like this feels like
right. It's very much like the Count of Monte Cristo,
Or also, what's the one where John Travolta gets like blasted with a nuclear warhead?
Broken Arrow,
yeah.
Or just like a lot of these period movies, the Scarlet Pimpernel, things like that were getting released and having these big sword fights in them.
So first, Hamlet impales Claudius with a sword by throwing it like a javelin into the...
Yeah, he pins him to his throne.
Yes. And then he drops a chandelier on him. Like he's a cartoon cat.
I mean, at least it's finally like the movie is actually like we've known it was dumb the whole time, but now it's actually like being
it's owning
dumb.
That, which is, I guess, why I responded so well to it.
Yeah, I see your point.
And so then Hamlet like runs down to him and starts spoon feeding the poison into Claudius's mouth, which is in the original play. It's an overkill death.
Yeah, it's fine.
Like he gets his due comeuppance, and then Hamlet takes 9 hours to die.
Because again, we have to have all of the text. I was worried. I was like, I don't actually know the full text. Does he talk after the rest is silence? I kept waiting.
Yeah, if he's gonna come back.
I kept waiting for another gasp for him to come up and start saying more shit to Horatio. It's fucking awful.
Yeah. You watch. I've never been happier to see a protagonist in a film die.
And he dies on his side like the Buddha.
Yeah. Yeah. And then is later raised above, his corpse hoisted up like the Christ.
With his eyes wide open.
Staring
we
dead
have
down the barrel of the camera.
Weird dead guy faces throughout this whole movie.
So Rufus Sewell bursts into the main hallway with his entire forces bursting in through the windows. Glass shatters.
Seethes his entire way to the throne.
Yep.
They fly in through the windows like a SWAT team, like Christmas Vacation.
Yep.
Shatter all the windows and gingerly open and walk through
the doors.
The mirrored doors, which should also have been shattering.
Yes, agreed. They should have been leaping through them, especially now that we saw that you were able to do that from the other side.
Right.
They should all be shattering. And even if not, I would have bought it. Anyway.
Right. Yeah. They already threw away the logic of wherever they're putting things behind those doors.
So Fortinbras
those mirrors are so central to whatever they're trying to pull off here.
Yeah.
Destroy them.
Fortinbras takes the throne. Horatio is explaining what happened. And then out of a side room, not from the main entrance, just like from a room.
No, he's been walking through this whole crowd unmolested, I guess.
Richard Attenborough just emerges from his long nap. We've never seen him before in this thing. He's the English ambassador who comes to tell Fortinbras that Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead.
Shakespeare just has to wrap up everything because he's just like, oh fuck, everyone's dying off stage, so like we have to say it.
And it is very funny. It is very funny to me that Horatio is like, oh, Claudius didn't want that anyway, so cool, I guess.
But like Fortinbras comes off just as very evil, which is a weird way to play him.
Yeah,
but,
well, I mean, Rufus Sewell has resting evil face.
I think that's just his face. Yeah, he's just a seether.
Yeah.
And so it's like everything that he says to Horatio, it seems like, and then I'm going to stab you in the back the moment you turn. But he's not going to because he's supposed to be a respectable leader.
Right. So they carry off Hamlet to be burned in a Viking funeral.
Yeah, and then they tear down the Hamlet statue.
They bring down Saddam Hamlet, and Elsinore is finally liberated. Mission accomplished. This movie sucks.
What a waste.
What a waste of everyone's time.
I mean, it was designed... It lost a lot of money. It was not a super high budget movie.
And this was 2 flops in a row because right before this, Branagh had adapted Frankenstein.
Well, but between this was his comedy about people putting on a production of Hamlet.
Oh, I see.
But but that was his self-funded, very small
That
thing.
was not his big feature.
This movie, this Hamlet, the 2-tape set was in every high school across the nation. What do we learn by looking at this? It does not deliver, like, you could do the Olivier movie. You could do, like, that one feels less hoary and dated. At this point, because it's old, you could do the 2000 Hamlet because it's not going to be ridiculed for trying to be hip or something.
And I also think it teaches kids about period pieces in a very unique and interesting way that, you can, and what adaptation means and, what choices work for you or what don't, because, like Hamlet 2000 or not, like you can at least, there's a lot of meat there to talk about and why they made the choices that they made.
I think the most important thing though, if you're showing this to kids, shouldn't be teaching about adaptation or teaching about period pieces. It should be teaching this play.
Sure.
Like, because they're not going to get a good sense of it by reading it.
Yeah,
they never are. And so you want to show them something that actually does the trick.
Yeah, which is hard.
And this movie certainly doesn't do it. I don't think Hamlet 2000 does it. We disagree a little bit on that, but
because I think Hamlet.
I think Hamlet 2000. I think Hamlet 2000 comes by it honestly, which this movie doesn't. This movie just is so.
Well, no kid is going to want to sit through this. Is the other thing too? It's so dogmatic. It is a film for Shakespeare nerds. Like it was like Hamlet. It was like Kenneth Branagh made a Hamlet
limeys
specifically for people playing Hamlet. Like as if you needed somebody to just run lines with you. You have it now.
I would
screen.
say, if anything, if someone needs one, I just don't think that Hamlet lends itself to film very well.
No.
Shakespeare in general, but like it's just, the style of the sort of thing. But you can make Macbeth work more easily than you can make Hamlet work.
Absolutely.
Right? You can make Othello work actually quite easily.
I think so. But
Hamlet itself just has a lot of weird things.
Yeah.
That are not weird on stage, but are incredibly bizarre on film.
There is a movie that just came out called The Northman, which is an adaptation of the original story that Hamlet is based on.
What I would say is if anyone actually wants to see Shakespeare, Hamlet, in a movie version that is decent, that is good, they should check out Hamlet in the Golden Veil.
Oh, I don't know this one.
VALE. No, you wouldn't. Apparently it's on Tubi. A couple
great.
of people I know worked on this movie, and I'm not gassing it up because they did. I just wouldn't mention it if I didn't like it.
This is a recent film?
2018.
Holy shit.
They literally got a fucking castle on Airbnb and just filmed there. I don't even know if they properly licensed, got the right forms for that shit. They were just like, we have enough money, we can rent this castle.
Unreal.
We're just gonna make a movie while we're there. It's 2 hours long.
I mean, that's how it should be.
Already, it shows that they're discerning in what they're doing here. And yeah, apparently it's on Tubi. You should watch that. If you are ever I read Hamlet, I don't fucking know what's going on, or you saw this fucking movie and you still don't know what's fucking going on.
Which is fair.
Hamlet and the Golden Veil is actually really, really good.
That rules. And also, Hamlet Goes Business you mentioned last time, but just,
which is an adaptation with modern text in Finnish. It's a comedy. It's an amazing movie. The death of Laertes is the funniest thing.
I still haven't watched it. I feel like I might have to after recording this. I'm sorry.
You have to.
No, I'm going to. I'm going to.
A lot of what we deal with here is stuff that we grew up with. And this is one of the things that has just stuck in my ass for so long, because it took me such a long time to find that these plays are actually good, because they drag this shit out where this movie is just there to celebrate Shakespeare rather than to tell the story of the play itself.
Yes.
And the more you get that, the more resistant you are to ever finding anything good in any of that material.
Yeah.
And so it's worth it to see something that actually engages with it honestly and shows you that this is actually a really good play.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, it's interesting that we cover this on our podcast, because I feel like when we watch a lot of Christian entertainment, it actually has almost the exact same problems that this movie does.
It does. It totally does.
It treats its basic text as sacrosanct. You cannot question it. Mm-hmm. It is perfect as is. There is nothing suspect about putting Gerard Depardieu in a room for 9 minutes and having him do absolutely nothing. It's perfect. Shakespeare wouldn't have written it differently.
Meets Hamlet in the Imagination Station.
Yeah, Shakespeare is God to Hamlet to Kenneth Branagh in this case. And it makes the movie inert and dull and completely inaccessible, because you're watching what is sort of the equivalent of imagine if you were going to watch pornography and instead they just showed you
I'll imagine that.
two diagrams of people, and they were describing, and now I am going to touch your breast. I am touching your breast. It's that equivalent for Shakespeare. Now, Kenneth Branagh actually has a very interesting connection to Hamlet, in that he's played him obviously before a lot, but he also inherited a sacred relic of the Shakespearean religion. And Brian, do you know about the Red Book?
I don't know about the Red Book.
There was a red leather bound copy of the complete works of William Shakespeare. Legend goes that it was used in the early 1900s by an actor playing Hamlet, and was passed on successfully until it ended up in Branagh's hands in the 90s. Literally 100 years of Hamlet, passing it to Hamlet, passing it to Hamlet. And the idea was that Hamlet would then pass it and anoint the next Hamlet. So Derek Jacobi had the copy, this red leather bound copy, and he bequeathed it to Kenneth Branagh, saying, "You are the next Hamlet. Out of all these Hamlets, you are the next one." Branagh held on to it for a very long time. This was shot in 96. He didn't give it away until about 2018. where he finally bequeathed the book to what he considered to be the next Hamlet. So this is passed up a lot of people, right? Andrew Scott didn't get it. Benedict Cumberbatch didn't get it. All these like big name stars, I guess the entire cast of Sherlock has played Hamlet at this point. David Tennant didn't get it, right? All these great British actors were passed over because Branagh didn't see his successor, right? What he considered to be the next Hamlet. Until,
oh my God, who's this going to be?
Here's the thing. I don't think it's a terrible choice.
Okay.
I actually don't think it's a terrible choice. He gave it to Tom Hiddleston. That is his next Hamlet.
Okay.
And he played Hamlet already. He's done. So now Hiddleston will then pass it on to the next. And I only hope that the next recipient of that red book takes more chances, cuts more text, and shows us the true beating heart of this wonderful play and doesn't cart it out as the husk that this 4-hour, over-bloated, boring as fuck movie gave us. I'm the worst of all possible AJs.
And I'm the worst of all possible Brians. And in the meantime, check out Hamlet in the Golden Vale.
So many possible worlds, but we got this one. So many possible worlds, but we got this one.
Hey folks, thanks for listening. Next week we're all going to be back, I hope, and talking about something that we like, or that I like. And there won't be any Andrew Lloyd Webber references, I guarantee you. I would like to extend our thanks to our newest crop, and it is quite a crop of new patrons this last week. Linnea Björnegren, Special Agent Dale Kupo, Colette Shade, Luke Plowman, Alex Bench, Not Animal, Joseph Wright Slagers, Orbital Road, Mr. Philip M. Knutson, Duncan, Shady Shopkeep, and Michael Paw. And of course, if you're listening on the public feed and you want to hear your name here at the end, consider going on over to patreon.com/worstofall and slipping some money our way. And if you join the $10 tier, you get to be one of our ride or dies, and I will say your name in this voice, just like Tony Diddy, Timmy Sexton, Hannah White, Rosie Armstrong, Nikola Donov, Katie Wall, John Johnson, Penn Badgerly, Dara Swisher, Alexa Valentine, Ashley Stoneman, and Silverbear 909. Oh, that this too solid flesh would let you tune in next week. See ya. Sorry. I can't help it.